Our planet, a colossal sphere of rock and metal, is in constant, silent motion. It spins on its axis with a relentless and dependable rhythm, a cosmic metronome that has dictated the cycles of life for billions of years. This rotation, reaching speeds of over 1,600 kilometers per hour at the equator, is so fundamental to our existence that we rarely pause to consider its profound influence. It is the invisible force that governs our days and nights. It sculpts our weather patterns. It even shapes the very ground beneath our feet. We live our lives entirely within its framework. Our societies and technologies are built on the unshakable assumption that tomorrow's sunrise is certain. Imagine, for a moment, the unthinkable. What if this fundamental constant were to briefly falter? Consider Earth's axial rotation coming to a complete, sudden halt for 60 seconds. This is not science fiction or apocalyptic fantasy. It's a rigorous thought experiment. By examining the consequences of such a brief interruption, we can peel back layers of normalcy, reveal the delicate mechanics beneath our everyday reality, and expose vulnerabilities we never knew existed. This is not the end of the world. Instead, it's a second-by-second analysis of cascading system failures and real-world consequences. We'll set aside sensationalism and focus on physics, engineering, and societal structures. What happens when the ground beneath every building stops? What happens beneath every power line? What happens under every moving vehicle? Meanwhile, the atmosphere and oceans keep moving eastward. The answer isn't Hollywood destruction. It's a chain reaction of predictable, measurable, and deeply disruptive events. These events would ripple across every facet of modern life, from global supply chains to local power grids. Our journey begins by framing this one-minute pause. We'll explore immediate kinetic effects in the first few seconds, then trace impacts as they propagate through interconnected systems. This is an exploration of resilience and fragility. A deep dive into how climate, infrastructure, and societies are tethered to the powerful spin of our world. The question isn't whether humanity would survive, but how 60 seconds of stillness and the chaotic minute of restart would fundamentally alter the world. The instant the Earth's solid crust decelerates to a halt, a great decoupling. Everything not rigidly anchored to the tectonic plates, the atmosphere, is suddenly liberated. Everything not anchored, the oceans, is suddenly liberated. Everything not anchored, every object on the surface, is suddenly liberated. By inertia, these elements continue their eastward momentum. At the equator, the air, moving at over 1,600 mph relative to stationary ground. At the equator, the water, moving at over 1,600 km/h relative to stationary ground. At the equator, everything else, moving at over 1,600 km/h relative to stationary ground. This is instantaneous, creating a violent shearing force at the boundary. It's like a vehicle braking so violently that everything inside is thrown forward at its original speed. The Earth's atmosphere, a vast ocean of gas weighing over 5 quintillion tons, would not stop with the crust. At the equator, this wind would reach speeds far exceeding the speed of sound, creating a continuous planet-wide sonic boom that would last the full 60 seconds. The friction between this supersonic layer of air and the stationary ground would generate immense heat, raising surface temperatures high enough to ignite fires, particularly in dry, vegetated regions. This hyperwind would act like a colossal sandblaster on a global scale. Anything not anchored deep into the bedrock would be at risk of being torn from its foundations. Forests, grasslands, agricultural fields would be shredded, organic matter pulverized and carried away. For human civilization, the atmospheric scour would be catastrophic. Every structure not built for supersonic wind loads would be subjected to forces far beyond its breaking point. Skyscrapers in coastal cities would face a horizontal force like a continuous explosion. Houses, bridges, power lines would be torn apart, their components becoming lethal high-velocity projectiles. The air would become opaque with dust and debris, a churning, chaotic fog moving at hundreds of meters per second. While the atmosphere scours the land, The world's oceans would be undergoing their own violent transformation. Sea levels would plunge along western coasts and spike along eastern coasts, a temporary planetary tilt in the water. The eastward surge would create hypertsunamis of unprecedented scale, not single waves but a sustained wall of water moving at Earth's rotational speed. Simultaneously, on western shores, the sea would pull back catastrophically, exposing the seafloor for hundreds of kilometers. When the pause ends and the Earth spins again, the water wouldn't simply settle. The oceans would oscillate, colossal rebounds. Further back and forth sloshing would create planet-wide standing waves, seiches. Those seiches could take days or weeks to dampen. The immediate consequences for global infrastructure would be catastrophic. The power grid would be among the first casualties. Cascading blackouts would spread on a scale never before seen. Power generation facilities would be torn apart. Transportation networks would be rendered non-functional. The digital infrastructure would suffer a devastating blow. Submarine fiber optic cables severed in thousands of places. On land, data centers would be breached, server racks and cooling systems destroyed. Satellites in orbit would lose tracking, telemetry, and orientation. Our eyes and ears in the sky would be flying blind. For any person caught in this event, the experience would be one of profound and violent disorientation. An acceleration force that would be instantly lethal. The only potential human survivors of the initial kinetic shock would be those located near the poles. Or perhaps those deep underground in facilities shielded from the atmospheric scour. An aircraft would be caught in a wind moving faster than its own flight speed, causing an immediate loss of control and catastrophic structural failure. Even for those hypothetically protected, the 60 seconds pause would be terrifying, plunging these subterranean shelters into darkness. The initial consequences are therefore not just about shattered infrastructure, but about the instantaneous removal of the stable environmental niche in which humanity has thrived. The supersonic winds scouring the surface would inject an unprecedented amount of dust, soil, and particulate matter into the atmosphere. This would likely trigger a rapid, sharp drop in global temperatures, a phenomenon akin to a nuclear winter, leading to widespread crop failures and ecological disruption. This abrupt and massive injection of heat at low altitudes, combined with the cooling effect of the dust shield, would create a highly unstable atmospheric profile. This instability would fuel the formation of violent, widespread thunderstorms and convective systems of a scale and intensity rarely seen. The widespread, friction-induced fires would release enormous quantities of carbon dioxide, soot, and other aerosols into the air. The massive, planet-wide seiches would continue for weeks, relentlessly battering coastlines. This would cause coastal erosion on a scale that would normally take millennia. The violent churning of the oceans would also lead to a complete breakdown of their thermal stratification. This upending would cause a massive die-off of marine life as species are violently displaced. The world's fisheries would collapse entirely. Great ocean currents like the Gulf Stream would be fundamentally broken. The global conveyor belt that moves heat from equator to poles would falter or stop. Northern Europe could plunge into a much colder state. Other regions might experience unexpected warming. The intricate, hyper-efficient global supply chain, the backbone of the modern economy, would be annihilated. Raw materials stop flowing. Manufactured goods stop flowing. Food stops flowing. A planetary crisis of scarcity. Financial markets go dark. Trillions in digital assets frozen or lost. Economies revert to localized barter and subsistence. Survivors use only immediately available resources. The energy sector would be in ruins. Near total and prolonged loss of electricity and refined fuels. Industry and agriculture unable to function without energy. The primary organizing structures of nations and states would dissolve. Central governments would have no means to communicate and no way to project authority. The world map would become a sparse archipelago of disconnected, self-governing communities. Surviving hospitals would be overwhelmed, running on finite backup power, and devolve into rudimentary first aid stations. Knowledge and practical skills become the most valuable currency. An engineer who can repair a generator, a farmer who can save seeds, a doctor with antibiotics become community cornerstones. In the years and decades following the 60-second pause, the Earth would settle into a new, harsher environmental equilibrium. Weather patterns would remain erratic for centuries, with the jet streams never fully recovering their former stability. The planet's coastlines would be permanently and dramatically altered. Former coastal metropolises would be nothing more than submerged ruins. The death of the world's coral reefs and the collapse of marine food webs would mean the oceans would be biologically impoverished for millennia. The slight but measurable redistribution of mass would cause a permanent shift in the planet's axial tilt and rotation. Life itself would adapt, as it always does. Over centuries and millennia, evolution would work on the hardy survivors. The small, isolated communities of survivors would form the seeds of new societies. For generations, progress would be measured not in technological advancement, but in rediscovery. Knowledge from salvaged books and memories of the elderly would become the most precious resource. The new world would be built on a foundation of resilience, not efficiency. Infrastructure would be decentralized by default, ensuring no single point of failure could cascade into global collapse. Buildings would be designed with immense dynamic load resistance in mind, almost as if built to withstand a constant hurricane. It would be a more cautious, perhaps less technologically spectacular civilization, but a far more durable one. The 60-second pause would be remembered as the great filter of human history, a devastating lesson in humility. A brutal reminder that we are passengers on a dynamic planet, and a catalyst that forced humanity to design a civilization robust enough to survive the unthinkable, ensuring its own long-term survival in a cosmos that offers no guarantees. What scenario should we explore next? Share your ideas below. You've been watching IfVerse, where imagination meets possibility. See you in our next reality.